Hi everyone, welcome to today's Future session. Today we're going to be talking about the professional displays market, some of the interesting developments and shifts that we've been seeing. I'm Johnny Woodman. I lead our commercial efforts across our professional displays team, and I'm joined by David, our lead market analyst for displays. I wanted to let's kick things off. I wanted to start quite broad. So I think when we talk about the Pro AV market. We talk about audio, video processing, infrastructure, but I think professional displays, is one of the key elements of that, and it's the most prominent feature when you walk into a room. Um, when we look at the wider Pro AV market, what do you see? Where do you see professional displays, and how do you see that role evolving?
Yeah, so as you say, pro displays are front and center of any professional AV setup, be that signage, presentation, collaboration, or the more kind of immersive displays that we're starting to see emerging. And so pro displays it takes up a very large budget within those pro AV setups. And what we're seeing is that budget increasing, and we expect to see that share of budget increasing. And the cause of that is really the demand for higher resolution displays, demand for larger and higher brightness displays. And so the place of pro displays within AV setups is, as I say, front and center, but set to take up a wider share of that budget as we go forward into the next few years.
Let's zoom in a little bit and get a bit more practical. When we look at real world deployments of pro displays, things continue to evolve pretty quickly. From your point of view, what are some of those real world deployments that you're seeing?
Yeah, so for trends, I would split that into three categories. So we would say collaboration in classrooms, presentation and signage, and then the more kind of immersive displays that we're seeing those trends in. So on that topic of immersive displays, that's where projection is thriving. So obviously there's a lot of replacement of projection in the more kind of collaboration in classroom spaces. But projection has the advantages of low cost for large displays that makes it very viable in those immersive spaces. For LED, I would say that's currently being used for things like video walls and for some signage, but we're starting to see that expand into more of those mainstream collaboration or presentation spaces. And then the other one to touch on for those trends would be e-paper, which obviously has very low energy usage and has massive advantages there in terms of total cost of ownership. And so there's a ceiling to the market for e-paper, I would say, just given its kind of niche applications. But we will start to see more of that, I would say, particularly in retail environments or for wayfinding and transport, those sort of use cases.
And so when we talk about the professional displays market, we obviously talk about a mix of different technology types, from interactive displays, LED video walls, and all-in-one displays, through to projection. So from your point of view, what are you seeing? What shifts are you seeing within the application of those different technology types?
Yeah, so IFBD remains the choice for collaboration in classrooms in those use cases where interactivity is required. And then for those use cases where interactivity isn't required, maybe budgets are tighter. FPD is obviously the choice, just given the benefits of much lower costs for those traditional use cases, that is. For projection, the market, as I say, is very much in kind of niches such as immersive displays, And then we're also seeing growth in things like simulation or entertainment for projection. For LED, as I say, the market is very much growing at the moment. And so LED is being used for, video walls, presentation signage, but we will start to see that more in those collaboration spaces, particularly interactive LED, which has a lot of potential at the moment. Prices are not really in the range where we're seeing the value of that currently, but certainly in the next few years, we'll start to see more iLED as prices come down on that. Obviously, budgets are very tight within segments like education, but we'll start to see prices come down, and that's where we'll start to see those deployments of interactive LED.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for the sort of transition of technology within the market at the moment. Shifting to something that we're hearing more and more from end users in our end user research. Obviously, while budgets are tightening and there is constraints on spending, we're seeing things like energy consumption and total cost of ownership becoming really important considerations in the purchasing journey. So, from your point of view, what are you seeing from end users around total cost of ownership and energy consumption?
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing with that is that efficiency and sustainability have been talking points for a while, but they've not necessarily been key factors when it comes to what makes a customer purchase a display. It's only more recently, as we're seeing energy costs going up, caused by global events at the moment, that's starting to be a factor in the purchasing decision. And so customers are really looking at, is this display efficient in terms of how much energy it uses? And will that keep my costs low for running that display? So for projection, that would be things like we're seeing a shift from lamp-based projection to laser-based, a real acceleration of that shift caused by that need for more energy efficient displays. And then for flat panel, it's things like dimming settings or having scheduling within the display to keep that energy consumption low.
So on the supply side, things aren't getting any less interesting. So obviously you've got the chipset situation, you've got the cost of shipping, you've got pricing. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, which is influencing, how things are made, how they're shipped, and how much they cost. So I'm really interested to hear from your side, what you think the impact, what impact that is having on the industry.
Yeah, so as you say, things are getting more costly in terms of shipping, and again, that comes down to global events. More costly in terms of manufacturing for the vendors and ODMs. And then there is also the chip shortage, which is causing, again, costs to increase. And from our research, speaking with vendors, it does seem the case that those costs are being pushed onto the end customers. So the pricing is getting higher for Pro displays. And what we expect is really to see more high value SKUs being pushed by the vendors just because they have higher margins. And so there's a lot more profit to be made on those higher value SKUs. But for the end customers, as I say, we do expect prices to continue to rise on all display formats.
Finally, if we zoom back out again and look at the global picture, obviously different verticals, different regions, different countries moving at different paces. I'm really interested to hear from your side. What do you see as the regions or the verticals that have the biggest sort of short-term growth opportunities?
Sure. So for where we're seeing the most value at the moment, which is in flat panel, be it interactive or general FPD, I would say it feels like the market is saturated, particularly in the more developed markets. But that isn't necessarily the case in more developing markets. So we will see more and more growth for IFPD, particularly in classrooms globally. And there's also kind of budgets increasing in more developed markets. So, for example, in Germany, they have Digital Pact, which is essentially a spending increase for education within Germany, which will be very positive for the display markets within Europe. For projection, as I said, we're seeing a lot of immersive use cases for projection. One of the real growth areas for projection over the past few years has been for golf simulation. And we expect to see more and more use cases of projection for different simulation scenarios. So that could be similar to golf simulation, kind of sports and entertainment. But what we've also seen at recent trade shows is simulation use cases for kind of training scenarios, kind of emergency services training using projection displays. For LED, that's kind of the real growth point for pro displays that we're going to see over the next few years. So as I say, price is coming down dramatically on LED over the past few years. We expect that to continue over the next few years. And so what we will see is LED starting to take the place of a lot of those, not just flat panel displays, general LCD flat panel, but also projection displays being taken up by LED, just given the benefits and those reducing costs, as I say. And then finally, for certain niche applications, e-paper has massive potential. So the low energy consumption, low energy cost. When an e-paper display is static, it's not using any energy, which is massively beneficial for things like signage, wayfinding, for use cases, as I say, in retail, for transport guidance, or many others. We'll start to see e-paper really picking up. So those are really the growth areas for displays at the moment.
Thanks, David. Great insights. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that session insightful. Excited to have you back for the next session.